Hello. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh, and I really appreciate you tuning in today. And I just want to start off by talking very simply about the Democratic debate before we get into any kind of news, because we were supposed to do a show a little bit earlier to come in and talk about the Democratic debate. But, yeah, and I think it's something that is very, very important that we do. And I think it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it really kind of reflected. And Bernie Sanders definitely, I think he won the debate. I think there's no denying that he won the debate. He looked better. But the thing is, I don't think it was enough. And I just really do want to, before we talk about all the coronavirus news, just want to take a moment to remember and reflect again as primaries are canceled all across the board today because of the coronavirus. I think only in Illinois and Florida they're going to continue to have the primaries. Every other primary has been pushed back all across the country because of the coronavirus and the fact that they don't want to be just herding elderly people into church basements and school gyms all across the country to get people to vote. And the whole idea is people are supposed to stay home, and the turnout probably wouldn't be very good and wouldn't be very legitimate anyway. So, yeah, and there has been a lot of early voting in some of the primaries as well. So that does speak to certain things. So, yeah. But again, I really just want to just take a moment here before we get into any of the coronavirus news, just reflect about what we saw with the debate last night. First of all, talking about Bernie Sanders, I think he did very, very well in a normal circumstance. Like he got Biden at least half a dozen times to say things that were obviously not true. Probably the most glaring being that he didn't write that bankruptcy bill, which he did write. Caught him blatantly lying multiple times about his record. But he wasn't called on it. That's the crazy thing. It's like the rules at this point are out the window, and you get the sense, the media, they don't have a lot of influence, they don't have a lot of power, they don't have a lot of, people don't like them, people don't respect them, which to a degree is true, but when you're talking about the Democratic primary voter base, like, there are seriously high amount of people that, like, if you wanted to take a slice of the electorate that probably respected the media and cared about what they say the most, it would probably be the Democratic primary electorate. And the group of the media and the way they saw this, they never want to give Bernie Sanders any kind of chance. Like, that's what we saw time and time again. Like, especially after Joe Biden coming out and then imagine if Bernie Sanders blatantly lied about his record right to Joe Biden's face. It's really, really crazy, and it just gives you a sense that no matter what Bernie Sanders does, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what will be the resulting effect, because the media is not going to call him on it. They're not going to hold him to account in any way, because they just want this to be over at this point. They want the primary wrapped up, over and done with, and they want to move on to the general election. Like, that is something that we have seen from various figures, and is probably pretty the broad-based consensus since, at least since Super Tuesday. Like, they just want to move on. It's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight with the coronavirus throwing the wrench in the whole thing. But what really feels like the crazy thing that's happening is politics as a whole is just losing influence. Like, the amount of like, in the American mind right now, politics, nobody cares anymore. That's the pretty crazy thing. And the question is this just going to be something that's over? Are people just going to turn right back to politics when the coronavirus blows over? I don't know. And I think what the coronavirus is really going to do, it's going to force us to re-examine and really take a look at all the holes that have been poked in the ship that is America, and how we can patch them up, because right now water is pouring through all those holes in an absolutely rapid and all-encompassing way. So, when we see that happening, it is very, very clear that there are some real problems that need to be put on. Like the restaurant industry, for example. Like the restaurant industry is just struggling so hard to stay afloat right now. There could be, like, restaurants, we spend more at restaurants than we do at grocery stores. It's huge. It's so important. The restaurant industry needs its customers, which are vanishing. But the thing is, the financial obligations are not vanishing, which, I mean, it shows you the importance of the suspension of rent, the suspension of taxes, which Emmanuel Macron did in France, and something that we really need to start doing here. I mean, just before I started recording this, I saw the Gavin Newsom of California just did this, and it's really, really crazy stuff. So, I mean, about the debate, I mean, they definitely did a good job by, like, really seeming to wake Joe Biden up at 6 today. That seemed to be a little bit of a help for him this time in terms of keeping him lucid and awake and sharp all throughout the debate. It was definitely his best debate performance. And I think the really sad thing is that Bernie Sanders, like, he failed to make a difference, and Joe Biden actually ended up, like, for example, I think the exchange on Social Security really captures this whole debate, because Joe Biden brought it up first. Bernie Sanders did not bring up Social Security, and Joe Biden still got hammered on it by Bernie Sanders. And I think really rightfully so, but it shows you just where Bernie Sanders' head was at, that he wasn't bringing this stuff up that would clearly go against his opponent, and something that he had a great record on, and he left left it to Joe Biden to bring it up and then take the L on. Like, it just shows you Bernie Sanders. He was tough when challenged. I mean, I don't think he really slipped up, but he did not make the game change. He just did not make the game change. And Joe Biden also outperformed based on the fact that he was much more lucid and much more sharp. But again, with that, and with the really devastating effect of just media support, people pretty much coming up and saying that they just wanted to wrap up this primary. The prevailing narrative from the media being that they just want to wrap up this primary, get it over with, put it all in the bag, and just get it done with. It was going to be really hard for Bernie Sanders to make a dent anyway. Like, something crazy had to happen. And with the Bernie Sanders campaign, do you really think it did? Like, do you really think it could have happened like that? I mean, it was very, very unlikely from the start. And I think there's going to be definitely have to be a lot of post reflection about what went wrong and how best to avoid a situation like this in the future, because everything was going according to plan. But the thing that happened was the establishment mobilizing and the coalescing of support behind Joe Biden after Super Tuesday that firmly solidified him in voters' minds as the safest choice candidate to go on and beat Donald Trump. And that was all off the back of South Carolina. That was all off the push of South Carolina. That was all off the benefit of South Carolina. And they just pretty much ran from there. And Obama made his calls. And the Bernie Sanders campaign, they just were not able to recover from it. And the question is, how do you recover from it? I think that is a very, very tough one that I certainly, at this time, am unable to come up with the answer to. But it's going to be a problem that I think if progressives want to win, and if they want to get past the obstacles Sanders' campaign keeps running into, they're going to have to deal with it. And I don't know how they will. All right, without further ado, I'm sure we'll end up talking about politics a little bit more in the show. Let's fully and officially start the show and discuss what's going on in the world today. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the coronavirus, the live updates, what's going on, as the Trump administration will ask for an $850 billion package to counter the economic fallout. Restrictions are tightening in the U.S. and around the world as leaders scramble to face a new reality. Wall Street appears poised to rebound even as the global markets wobble. the Trump administration turns on itself when it comes to its response. New York City curfews are in consideration as the public life is curtailed. European countries are rushing forward with relief efforts as death surge and lockdowns expand. And Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson have been released from the hospital. We'll also be talking about some other news, including the terrifying new research warning 2.2 million Americans could die from coronavirus in the U.S. without drastic action. And also how the health insurance industry is responding to this news. How well they are gassing up their tax on Medicare for all. Because of course they are. All right, let's get right into this here. So what's going on right off the top? The Trump administration is going to be considering asking for an $850 billion, or they will ask for an $850 billion package to counter the economic fallout, as the Trump administration is preparing to ask for an $850 billion in additional stimulus to support the economy, which is facing a deep downturn as businesses close as the coronavirus spreads. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is expected to make the pitch for additional fiscal firepower on Tuesday to Republican senators, some of whom have been hesitant to embrace the legislation the House passed last week, according to people familiar with the plans. And the crazy thing is, a lot of Republicans are actually coming on Twitter and saying the House legislation doesn't go far enough and that universal basic income is needed, which is really insane when you have Democrats being outflanked from their left by Republican senators with the various plans. For example, Tom Cotton putting one out, Mitt Romney putting one out. It's really crazy stuff. I mean, there's always something I think worth reading between the lines whenever you see a Republican plan emerge, a possible Republican plan purporting to say that the House doesn't go far enough. But that the fact that that's even happening shows you the epic failure of Nancy Pelosi and her unceasing ability to end up compromising with herself, and saying before she even puts legislation out there, we got to water it down a little bit from what we quote unquote actually want, which I at this point don't believe they actually want that, because of the fact that the Republicans are so crazy they're not even going to agree. But apparently it turns out they thought that Nancy Pelosi didn't go far enough, because her best bill, her best effort was a bill that coming off the top, does not give paid sick leave to 80% of the workforce. So, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on there. That payroll tax cut is the big thing that President Trump has been calling for. It's what they really are going to want to do, apparently. So the Trump administration is also supportive of a request for a $50 billion in economic relief for the airline industry. The industry's lobbying group publicly made a request on Monday asking for grants, loan guarantees, and tax relief. And I think it's going to be very important. It's actually very sad that we're not going to see a lot of thought being paid to the most vulnerable. All these people, all these industries, the restaurant industry, like the people who are out there who have lost their jobs or are very much in danger. The people working grocery stores right now, the people who are quote unquote this is amazing that people are still doing this, like ordering Uber Eats and having these poor working class people drive around and deliver them food. Like, that is just disgusting. The fact that you even think that's an okay thing to do. Like, you're asking, think about what you're asking a delivery driver to come to your house and to give you food. Like, and like the people who work in the groceries, all these industries, the hospitality industry that are still in function today, and are probably going to go more out of function as more and more as time goes on. Like the danger that they're putting themselves in for the paycheck and the ability to deliver food, I think it's so many, like that should be not forgotten. But I really get the sad sense that this being America, we are going to forget about them. We're going to not give them everything that they need, and they're going to be really hurt and hit the hardest by the coronavirus. And I fear that no one's going to really even pay attention to it, because that is where we are today. So Larry Kudlow, the director of the National Economic Council, laid out the administration's fiscal stimulus approach on Monday and said that it would amount to about $800 billion. Kudlow and Mnuchin are considering an array of other proposals to help individuals and small and medium-sized businesses.